government contract workers, nonprofit workers, and government welfare recipients should have their voting rights suspended while they are one of those three. This is the fourth in a series I'm doing on how to shrink government. This one here is going to tackle all three of those groups. I was going to break this into three separate videos, but then because of discussions online over at Read It and on the forum called Libertarian Forum, as well as discussions in a couple private libertarian groups, telephone calls, emails, in-person conversations I've had with people, I think it's best I put all these three into just one video so I can move on from, in some people's eyes, restricting people's ability to vote onto another topic. Now, this is again the fourth in a series on how to shrink government. The first one was why government workers should not pay taxes. Second one was why government workers should not be allowed to vote. Third one was why politicians should not be allowed to vote. If you'd like to see those three videos, here's a link to his playlist. This one covers three other groups that I believe shouldn't be allowed to vote while the people are in these groups. Government contract workers shouldn't be allowed to vote because there's not really much distinction between them and a regular government worker. It's a common objection when I say government workers should not vote. They say, well, there are government contract workers that make their money from government, and I agree, there are. And they should also have their voting rights suspended while they are fulfilling that government contract. No one stumbles into a government contract. Businesses solicit governments. They make bids on this. They're actively engaging, actively seeking, actively wanting a government contract. Employees that work for those businesses, some of them might not realize that their business has a government contract. They might be working what they think is a business that is solely for profit. That's another thing I think would be very good to educate the public about, is about how much government and the private sector are intertwined. And I think this process will start to untwine them. When you are working for a government contractor, you are willing to accept taxpayer money to do a service for a government. I do not believe you then should have the ability to vote to elect politicians who are going to determine whether or not you get that contract, how big that contract is, how big the budget is for whatever governmental body is contracting out that contract. It's a conflict of interest. You have a vested interest to have that contract be as large as possible so that your employment could be longer, or you could be paid better, or your company could experience better profits, etc. It is a conflict of interest that has to be dealt with. So if you're working for a government contractor, part of your employment application would be being informed, getting part of the process of being employed, would being told, if you work for us, while you work for us, your ability to vote will be suspended for that length of that contract, and I would have extended 1 year beyond that. Why the 1 year extension is to prevent pro-big government politicians from basically gaming the system, where all the government contracts may end on November 7th. So at that stage, you can be said, well, he's not a government worker now, and then November 9th, you're hired back. By having a year beyond when you were a government contractor, that's largely eliminated. No one's going to want to be unemployed for a year just so they can vote in an election. There might be some that will say, oh yes, I would. But the vast majority of people says, no, I actually need an income. Now, let's move on to nonprofit workers. Nonprofit organizations, they're subsidized by government. They're given tax-exempt status. And what that means is that they don't pay a corporate income tax on the revenue that they bring in for their organization. They don't pay a property tax, and in many states they don't even pay a sales tax. This is very strong subsidization of the nonprofit by taxpayers, because you see, if they're not contributing to the tax rolls, then someone else is going to have to make up the difference. Nothing's free. Contrary to what I believe Democrats believe and socialists and communists, money doesn't grow on trees, although our Federal Reserve prints it like there's no tomorrow, but we're paying a price. Inflation is because government overprints the money supply. That's by and large how inflation happens, because capitalism is a deflation process. It is to enable you to buy more with less. Government is just the opposite. You can buy less and you have to pay more. Anyways, so if a nonprofit, say a church, were to have to start paying taxes on the donations that they collected, on their churches, the property taxes on their churches, or on the sales tax for anything that they buy, this would dramatically affect what that church can do and cannot do. So it is a direct subsidization. And again, this is not something that you just stumble across. You have to apply to get nonprofit tax-exempt status. You have to go through, there are guidelines of what you can and cannot do. One of them is you're not politically active, you're not using it for political purposes, although that's commonly violated, but that is the general intent of the nonprofit, is that you're not going to engage in politics. Well, this is just an extension of that. You're not going to vote in the election. You're not going to elect politicians who give you this special status that is not afforded to those in the private sector. You see nonprofits using their nonprofit advantage against for-profit corporations as a competitive edge. I can do it cheaper than you. For example, the post office. It is a quasi-governmental agency. It's government, and yet it is to operate under its own revenue. It hasn't for years. It's been in the red for years. But if they had to pay property taxes on all their postal buildings, if they had to pay corporate taxes on whenever they would get a profit, if they had to pay sales taxes for what they purchase, they would not be as effective of a competitor against Facebook. Not Facebook. Against UPS, Federal Express. They are using their tax-exempt status as one of their weapons to be competitive with these for-profit private sector delivery companies. In fact, they actually use a government monopoly on first-class mail to further have this advantage. First-class mail postage is actually subsidizing their parcel delivery service so they can make it cheaper than what Federal Express and UPS have, because they have a federal monopoly on first-class mail. just FYI, you don't own your mailbox. It is actually a federal crime for you to put a letter in someone else's mailbox. Now, the Postal Service is not such an idiot that they would ever do that, prosecute someone for putting a party invitation in someone's mailbox. But your mailbox is not owned by you. Your mailbox is actually owned by the Postal Service. Only it can put letters into it, no one else. So that's an illustration of how a nonprofit can give itself a competitive advantage. In fact, that one having a government monopoly that for-profit competitors cannot even compete in. And that's not good for society. Now, there's going to be people that are going to say, well, they're doing such good for society that it is a shame that we take away their ability to vote. But again, they're being treated special by society. They don't have to pay taxes. Now, our people say, well, the nonprofit workers pay income taxes. That is true. But they derive their income from the tax-exempt status, in part, that their employer enjoys. Now, the third group that I want to talk about is welfare recipients, government welfare recipients. Not private welfare recipients, but government welfare recipients. Some people believe that these people are like down on their luck. We shouldn't hit them down further by taking away their ability to vote. But that's wrong. These are people who are directly benefiting from government. And they now get to then elect the politicians that are going to determine what government welfare they get. I mean, this is a common tactic by the Democrats, but also pretty common by the Republicans as well. Basically, I'll give you free stuff. And in that way, these people are receiving direct benefit from government, and yet having a vote in what the government essentially then will give them. I would have caveats to this. Unemployment compensation and Social Security being two of these caveats. I believe that, one, everyone is forced to pay unemployment compensation. And they keep a very accurate tab of how much you've actually contributed to unemployment compensation. And they keep even a greater tab on how much you've contributed to Social Security. But if you're on unemployment for so long that what you've contributed into it, you've already been paid back. At that moment, when you're now not taking back what you had given into it, you're on welfare, period. Now, you can adjust what they've contributed in by inflation. I would even be open for you being able to have a decent interest rate on what you contributed over that time. But there will come a point in time when there is no way you can argue, I'm getting what I've paid in. You've gone beyond that. Social Security is another one like this. We have a gerontocracy in our society in the United States of America. It is destroying our society. It simply is. More than 50% of the federal budget goes to Social Security and Medicare. 50%. Now, some people complain, normally on the left, on how much that we spend on them in the military. And on us libertarians, we also complain about that. But that only represents 20% of the federal budget. Social Security and Medicare represents 55%. I believe that because you contributed into Social Security, when you apply for Social Security, you should be told when there will come the point when you have received back more than you have what you have received from Social Security and Medicare is more than what you have put in. And that's something that we have to take in consideration. And just as when you apply for unemployment compensation, they say you can still vote up until this point, and then your voting ability is suspended until you are no longer on unemployment compensation, and then 1 year beyond that. Again, to prevent the pro-big government politicians of having everyone's unemployment check ending on November 7th, so everyone can say, oh, he's not on unemployment compensation, and then restarting up on November 9th. With Social Security, one, that would have to be done as well. You couldn't have your Social Security benefits stop on November 7th, so you can say, well, I'm not on Social Security, and then they restart up on November 9th. Again, a year extension beyond when you receive Social Security, beyond the point where you have contributed to it. But because we have a society, the United States of America, where we are now drowning in debt, and we're drowning in debt because of Social Security and Medicare. It's more than 55% of the federal budget. We have to put an end to it. But right now, Social Security is viewed as the third rail. Politicians don't want to touch it because, oh, you'll get killed by it. Third rail being in urban areas, you have a subway. There are two rails that the subway cars, their wheels run on, and then there's a third rail that powers it with electricity. If you fall on the track and you touch, even slightly, that third rail, you'll be electrocuted to death. It has happened too many times, and that's why they say Social Security is the third rail. You don't touch that rail. You don't touch Social Security, but we have to touch Social Security. We don't have an option. When Social Security was created, the retirement age, the eligibility age for Social Security was 65. But when it was created, the average life expectancy of people was not 65. There was only one group where it was 65, and that was white women. White males, I think their life expectancy was 60, black females 55, black males 50. So as far as blacks and men were concerned, they were going to die. The majority of them were going to die before they ever saw a Social Security check. And that was done on purpose. You see, Social Security was only intended originally for widows and orphans. That's what it was for. And it was never meant to provide you an income. It was only meant to be a supplement. Now, a lot of people throw around the term Social Security fund. It's an entitlement. I put my money in and I deserved it. I deserve this entitlement. Well, one, the fund aspect of Social Security only lasted for 1 year. The following year, after it was enacted, the fund was eliminated and became a direct transfer welfare program, meaning your money didn't go into an account and you didn't gain interest. It's not like a 401k. It means that money that you give in Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes goes directly to Social Security Medicare recipients. And if you want to really know, that was welfare from the very beginning. There were people who never contributed anything to Social Security or Medicare who got Social Security and Medicare at the very beginning of the program. That's welfare. My family, my father's mother, she had not contributed anything into Social Security. And my dad filled out the forms, etc., and she was put on it. It was welfare for her. And when it was started, it was only meant to be a supplement. I mean, you were not to live on it. It was just to supplement your income, widow's income. And that's how they sold it. Oh, you don't want to help out widows and orphans? I mean, that's how the big government advocates got Social Security to be passed. But that was getting their foot in the door. Because after that, They then started including everybody. Now anyone who's 65 years of age or older can get it. In fact, you can get it before 65. You just get a reduced amount that you'll then get if you hadn't waited. I have a friend, and she's 62 years old, and she just recently went and talked to the Social Security, and her husband died, and she was told by someone else that she can start collecting his Social Security, and then when it comes to her time to retire, she then can fall back onto her own Social Security. Widows can only choose either their Social Security or their husband's. Widowers supposedly can too, although they tend to die before their wives. Men tend to die before their wives, not widows. But the problem with Social Security is eligibility age stayed the same. And then people's health improved. Our longevity improved. It did not keep up with the average longevity of white women. It just stayed at 65. Now white women, on average, lived at 85. Half of them will be on Social Security for 20 years before half of them die. Men now live, I think it's to 75. Black women, I believe, now live to 80, and black men, I believe, live to 70. But this is a problem because we have not. Because we have not kept the eligibility age for Social Security in pace with a longer living population. Well, we have a situation where more than 55% of the federal budget goes to them. Our country is essentially a gerontocracy, a country ruled by old people. And that's got to stop. It's going to stop. We can't continue on this forever. I know that socialists, communists, the pro-big government, the Democrats think we can. They keep kicking the can down the road. It'll be someone else's problem, another generation's problem. But that just means that when the problem finally hits us, it's going to hit us like a ton of bricks. Now it'll be like several tons of bricks. We have to do something now. Now, if I was allowed to decide what we do, what I would do is anyone that is currently on Social Security and Medicare gets to stay on Social Security and Medicare. They were fed the bullshit that went along with it. That was an entitlement. They gave up their jobs. They can't go back to what they had because whatever job they gave up has probably long ago been filled. In fact, probably in their profession doesn't exist anymore for all essential purposes. Their job skills have all deteriorated until they're very likely would be completely out of water, a fish out of water, if they were trying to come back into what was their job, if their job still existed today. That's a price I think our society, should pay. We misled them about what was going on. That was a fund, that was an entitlement, and we got to pay the price. But how we pay the price is that right now, we shouldn't do a gradual increasing of Social Security age. It should be a great leap. But the only way we're going to do that is by literally taking the votes away from senior citizens. And we can't take away all of them. I'm not saying take away all of them. But when you get Social Security, you should be told by Social Security Administration, here's how long you can collect Social Security and still have the ability to vote. But when you reach at this point, whatever time that is, beyond that point, you have received some from Social Security more than you put in, adjusted for inflation, and paying a respectable interest rate on that amount. Beyond that point, you are on welfare, and if you want to continue to receive Social Security, you have to give up the ability to vote. The seniors are going to scream. The AARP is going to really scream his head off about this. But that's what we have to do. The AARP is part of the problem. We have a system right now where, because senior citizens vote, and they do vote, that, again, Social Security, Medicare is considered the third rail in politics, and it is ruining our country. If you are a senior citizen and you have been on Social Security and Medicare for more than 5 years, statistically, you have received back more than you've contributed in. Again, my lady friend, who just went to talk to Social Security, she was told that if she were to retire right now, she would make $25 less a month than what she currently makes from her current job. Now, she's not going to do that because she's a diabetic and she needs the insurance, and she won't be eligible for Medicare until she turns 65. So she's going to continue working until she hits 65. And then by that time, Social Security probably will pay her more than what she's making now. So she's looking to retire at that time. We got to stop them from doing that. The baby boomers are going to bust the system. They're going to boom the system. There's just no way around it. They're too big of a wave that's going to hit Social Security and Medicare. Now, am I a baby boomer? I'm on that little line. I was born in 1963. Some consider me the last of the baby boomers. Some consider me part of the next generation. I think Generation X. I'm not sure what title they like calling that. But I'm more than willing to have Social Security. Let's move it up to 85. The average life expectancy of white women. Let's move that way. That means, because I live a relatively healthy lifestyle, my estimated life expectancy is 86. If that is when I actually do die, and I hope I don't, but if I actually do die then, I will then have been on Social Security for 1 year. By the way, the last year of your life is a really horrible year. Don't really look forward to the last year of that life. But that's about, as much as, statistically speaking, I would be able to collect from Social Security if the Social Security age was raised to 85. We, the baby boomers, have to do this. If we want to have anything for our parents in their retirement, we have to do this. We have to take the bullet. We have to take the hit. I know baby boomers really hate taking responsibility for anything. They're the hippie generation. But we really got to do this. And one of the ways we can get this thing done is by having senior citizens who have been on Social Security longer than that have been on there so long that they've received back more than they have put in, no longer have the ability to vote. Will they get upset? Yes, they'll get upset. But again, 55% of our federal budget goes to senior citizens, Medicare and Social Security. They are bankrupting our nation, and we have to do something about it. Trimming out government waste is not going to do it. You can't trim 55% of there's no 55% that's waste. That would be Social Security. I think in these changes that I'm proposing in this series, that the first easiest one is to suspend the ability of government workers to vote. Suspend government workers' ability to vote. And that will cause kind of a domino effect. Then we may go after government contractors. Now, as far as government contractors, government corporations, they are intertwined, but I think what will happen there is that if you're a stockholder in a government contractor, you're an owner. And it doesn't matter if you have 1 share or 1,000,000 shares, you lose the ability to vote if you own that stock. What will happen is corporations that are quasi-government contractors, they have a for-profit wing of their business and a government contract wing of their business, they'll de-invest themselves of each other so that there'll be separate companies, and then those that want to retain their voting rights, which I think will be a majority of people. If you're going to invest in something, there's lots of different options. Why would you invest in something that would remove your ability to vote? But if you already, now, some people might say, well, then the company stock of that other part that is the government contract is going to be worth a lot less. And I think it should be. But also there's going to be people who already have lost, have had their voting rights, voting ability suspended. And they'll look into investing into those businesses. I already don't have the ability to vote. I might as well invest in these businesses because these prices are cheaper. I think that would be a good thing. The investment of for-profit corporations, of their government contracts, will be an eye-opening experience, an education for society on how much government has intertwined itself into the marketplace. And I think that's a very good thing for us to know about. But I think this is all going to be probably done in stages. Very likely in the states that allow citizen-initiated referendums, because politicians won't want this. And that's why, again, politicians shouldn't have the ability to vote. A referendum is essentially saying, politicians, we don't trust you. We're taking this to a direct vote. We're bypassing you. I don't see then where the politicians say, well, I'll still get a vote in that referendum. No, you're a public servant. Act like one. Our objections I would just deal with here is a common one by state is where they talk about, they bring up the cops, firefighters, soldiers. Well, you're taking away the ability of cops, firefighters, and soldiers to vote. And yes, I am. I was a soldier once. I would have been fine with it. And the pro-big government advocates only have themselves to blame. Because they have loved to always be telling us that these government workers are public servants. Well, if you're a public servant, you're not a public equal. You're not a public master, even though the politicians surely act like as if they are a public master. You should not get the ability to vote. That's truly saying that you are an equal of the public. You're not a public servant. In my home state of Wisconsin, Governor Walker, for his reforms of the government unions, exempted firefighters and I believe firefighters and police. And he did that as a politically strategic way to make it pass through, because the Democrats and pro-big government people always like pushing forward the cops, saying, oh, if you take away government union rights, you're affecting cops, and everyone has to support the cops, everyone has to support the firefighters. I don't think we need to worry about that, because again, cops, firefighters, soldiers love saying that they're public servants. It is how the government has sold us on them. Well, now the roosters are coming home, the chickens are coming home to roost. You can't then turn around and say, oh, wait a second. No, we deserve to be able to vote. And they say, but then how are you a public servant? You know, that sounds like you think you're an equal of ours. And then for politicians, they surely act as if they're public masters. Now, there are silly arguments that have also been made. Well, you benefit from roads, from education, from government maternity leave, government mandated maternity leave. But all those are where government has come in and says, you have to obey this. You're not given a choice. There's not an option. In many places, in some states, maternity leave is not even an option. You will take maternity leave when you reach this stage of your pregnancy. You don't, some say, oh, free education, free public education, but that's mandatory. As a parent, you are required to educate your child in a certain way as dictated by government. And that's simply not voluntary. In fact, it isn't until, in some states, Iowa and Wisconsin, this is the case, you have to remain in school until you're at least 16 years of age. There's these people called truancy officers that will come after you if you do not go to school. You're not given the option. Now, you can be homeschooled. You can go to private boarding schools and private charter schools, but the government comes in and says you have to do some form of education, and in these private institutions, they mandate what you have to do. So that argument there for schools doesn't fly. You use roads. Well, we're not allowed not to use roads. You can't build a private road system and not cross a government road. And if you try to build a road system, the government comes in and tells you exactly how you're supposed to build it. That's simply wrong. And you can't use that as an example. I've even heard sillier arguments saying, well, taxpayers have funded the military and we've gone into the Arab nations to get their oil. So if you're driving your car, you're directly benefiting from government. Again, we didn't get a choice in that. The politicians are the ones that sent us to war. I don't ever recall a referendum that said, all those in favor of invading Iraq, raise your right hand. Well, in this case, left hand. Never have I ever, in fact, I don't know if there's ever been a time in history, and please, if you know, say so, let me know, inform me, give me a link to this in the comment section below. But never in history has the population ever been allowed to vote directly on whether or not we go to war with someone. I know it's never happened in the United States of America. Never at the federal level, and that's the only level that you can go to war with. So, I mean, that argument, that's just a silly argument. Those that make that argument, there are people who know that they've lost the argument, and so they just try to make the argument absolutely silly. And that's one way is one of the people that was posting on one of the forums countered that, well, you're benefiting from the oil that our military took out of the Arab nations. We didn't have a choice. That was not voluntary. We did not vote. The public did not have a referendum saying, are we going to go to war with Iraq? Are we going to go to war with Afghanistan? No. So again, it's the voluntary nature of it. If you want a government job, you decide to take it. Are there exceptions to that where you are forced to take a government job? Yes. If you are drafted into the military, I believe you should not lose your ability to vote. In fact, I really want you to vote then. If you are, and we already have it with prisoners. Prisoners lose their ability to vote. Some states give it back eventually. Our states never do. Once a criminal, always a criminal. To taking a job with a government contractor. No one's forcing you to do that. You're deciding, and it's one of the factors you have to decide on. You may take it, or you may value your voting right as being more valuable and look for another job where you can retain your ability to vote. Same thing with working for a nonprofit. No one's forcing anyone to work for a nonprofit. If you want to work for a nonprofit, while you're working for the nonprofit and receiving the benefits that your employer receives by having tax-exempt status, you should not have the ability to vote and for the length of your employment and 1 year later. However, if you're a nonprofit and you don't have tax-exempt status, you should have the ability to vote. You're not receiving a benefit from government. You're just telling government, we're operating as a nonprofit, but we're not asking for any special tax privileges, which in nonprofit's case is not being taxed. Same thing with welfare. No one forces welfare on people. Government makes it rather hard to get welfare. You have to prove that you have a need. You have to fill out the forms. That's what you have to do to get welfare. No one forces it on you. Well, if you were to get welfare when they tell you what you're going to get, at that time they say, if you agree to receive these government welfare benefits, your ability to vote is suspended for that length of time plus 1 year. And yes, in case they're ones that want to really fight down in the minutia, if you're receiving quote-unquote private welfare from a tax-exempt nonprofit, I think again your voting rights, your voting ability should be suspended during that time that you receive that welfare, and then 1 year later, 1 year beyond. By getting these people who directly benefit from government out of the voting population, we then have we have more real taxpayers voting, and I think it's asinine to think that people who don't contribute should benefit by voting for someone who will improve their benefits. Now, there is also an argument, and I'm in favor of it, that below a certain income level, you really don't pay any federal taxes. I'd be open to having their voting rights suspended because, again, they're benefiting from government without contributing to it. They're getting the freeloader. I mean, here's an analogy, if you want to have an analogy for how welfare recipients work by allowing them to vote in an election. Imagine you're going to a beggar and you have pity on them, and you want to take some money out of your wallet and put it into a little tin cup. That's good for you. Nice that you did that. But how would you feel if the beggar then stood up and said, give me your wallet, counted out how much money you had in that wallet, and then had an equal say of how much you put into their tin cup? That's what we have in. That's the same as allowing those on welfare to elect politicians who then determine how much they're paid in welfare. That's what we have to correct. Will this tick off people? Yes. Will the pro-big government people be absolutely opposed to this? Of course they will, because unless they're dumb, they don't understand what's going to happen. We're going to have government that's going to greatly reduce in size. And also one thing here. This series is called How to Shrink Government. But a lot of these suggestions aren't talking about shrinking government directly. It's setting up the conditions that would get the real taxpayers more power so that they can decide how much they want to shrink government. And I'm fully in favor that if all these groups that are receiving government benefits were to be removed from the voting block, and then the voting block votes to still give out those benefits, I'm in favor of that, and I expect that. I'm not expecting unemployment compensation to disappear. I'm expecting it to greatly reduce. As I said in a previous video, when a Scandinavian country did an analysis of unemployment welfare benefits receivers, they found a reverse bell curve like this, with those who got recently unemployed finding jobs, but then also just dropped off, with them practically doing no finding of jobs until they were within a month or two of their unemployment compensation benefits expiring, and then all of a sudden they went and found themselves a job. When that country reduced how long those people could be on unemployment compensation, that bell curve stayed the same. It's just the middle part shrunk. And that was an eye-opener. I think the Scandinavian country continued to reduce down that span. Anyways, this is the last in this series about removing the ability to vote for people who directly benefit from government. Tomorrow, I'll release a video that will talk about how we can make taxation painfully visible. If this is the first time you've been to my channel, and by the way, I think this is the longest video I've ever done for this channel so far. Maybe I should have broken this video up into 3 different parts. Please subscribe to this channel. In the last 20 seconds of this video, you're going to see my picture on the screen, a little avatar. Click on that and subscribe. Because I sometimes put out more than one video in a day, and sometimes I put out videos as quickly as I can in response to breaking news. If you'd like to be informed when those videos come out right away, excuse me. Next to the subscribe button is the bell icon. Click on that and pick between the 2 forms of notification, text or email. Also, I have a mailing list. And when that mailing list gets to 100 subscribers, I'll start producing a weekly unlisted video where I reply to selected comments posted to last week's batch of public videos. If you'd like to see those reply to comment videos, in the description below is a link to that mailing list sign up form. Please subscribe. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye.